we're very pleased that you are here this evening. Thank you for coming. You're starting this evening with a new theme in the second community that is on death and dying. Death is an issue that no culture or faith tradition can ignore, and it's a source of fear to a lot of people. It is a dread. It is, to some, it is a thought of a hopeful transition, and others are, I think for everyone, there is a lot of mystery that's involved. And that moves us towards considering varieties of ways in which faith traditions deal with the issues around death and dying. I'm going to give you a few thoughts that go back to ancient civilizations that give some perspective of where human beings learn about all this. Ancient Egyptians had very complex beliefs about death and afterlife. They believed that after death, what was called the Ka was an entity like associated with our physical body, was able to eat, drink, and smell, and essentially enjoy the afterlife. And then they believed that the soul, called Ba, could not survive without the body, and what's more, it had to be able to recognize the body in order to return into it. And therefore, you have the Egyptian, all the Galactic things about preserving the body and mummification and the tombs and the food and so forth within the tombs. Ancient Mesopotamians, it was a civilization around where Iraq is now, and it was around the same time as the Pharaohs of Egypt, had a very different view of death. They were very afraid of death. The dead were largely feared, and they thought that distressed, murdered, and evil spirits could escape the land of the dead and cause havoc among living beings through entering the bodies of the living through their ears. Views of death in ancient Greek and Rome were very similar, though centuries apart. Both believed in a similar god of the underworld called Hades by the Greeks and Pluto by the Romans, who ruled over the underworld. A proper burial was important to both Greeks and Romans, who believed that the dead could linger as ghosts if the living failed to carry out the appropriate funeral rites, which included food offerings. In Greece, immortality to those who died could only be attained through remembrance by the living. In ancient China, it was believed that death was just a prolongation of life. The ancient Chinese believed that the dead would continue in the spirit life much as they had done in this life, and thus provisions were made for those that had died for use in the afterlife. Now, the interest of the second community is to look at contemporary views about death and dying. We are not a program that's interested in being scholarly in the sense of appealing to your head. We're very much interested in providing very good and reliable information from qualified people. But what we want that to lead to is for you to become more introspective about yourself and interested in what other people that have a faith tradition other than your own faith and how that plays out in their lives. That's what this program is all about. It's certainly to convey the information, but less than information, it's about engagement with each other around topics that are important at a personal level with a cross-religious perspective. And so we're interested certainly in your speaking, but we're more interested in your developing ability for people listening. And you're going to be going through some clusters later on, and we hope you'll go there not so much practice to do your thing and show how much you know, but rather to be very eager to listen to what other people think as well as sharing your own views. And from that, to let that come back into your own life, your own faith tradition, and for you to deepen your tradition out of the understanding of varieties of ways that people see the same kind of issues. So we're entering into, I think, a very interesting series that has lots of ramifications of it, and we're going to explore a few of those, and we're starting with the basic question, what does it mean to die? We're going to do that topic both this month and next month, and we're going to have two different sets of representatives from faith perspectives that are going to address that topic. So we're very pleased you're here, and we hope that you will be back in the succeeding months to see this as it unfolds. Our first presenter this evening is Mahlon Hight, who is the minister of Congregational life at Northaven. She joined the Northaven staff about 6 months ago in late 2014. She previously served at Creekwood, Walnut Hill, and Weston Hollow United Methodist Churches. She's a graduate of Perkins School of Theology with a master's in church ministry and a concentration in urban studies. And while at Perkins, she also earned her certification in spiritual direction. Previously, Mahlon has training and experience as a community organizer, and she also worked in the textile design industry for many years prior to her entering into ministry. Mahlon came to Northaven with maturity and with a variety and depth, a broad depth of experience. And she's been here 6 months. She is really kind of beginning to make her place here now, I think, and is, I think, gifted in many ways and committed in every way. And we're very pleased that she's going to present from a Christian perspective on the topic, what does it mean to die?
Can everybody hear me? Is this good? Is this good? Need to talk louder? We're okay? All right. Is that all right? Okay. Okay, so me being here is proof that God has a sense of humor. Because when I saw what Second Community was going to be considering for the next few months, I honestly thought, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm all that interested in it. And Bob called me and told me he wanted me to present the Christian perspective. So I took that as a sign that I needed to give this some thought. What does it mean to die from a Christian perspective? So I would say probably the most commonly perceived answer to that question is that Christians believe that those who have accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior go to heaven to spend eternity with God, and that those who haven't go to hell to spend eternity in some sort of torment, and Satan might be mentioned in that. The truth is that there are so many variations on that perceived construct within Christianity that it is impossible for one person to give a Christian perspective of what it means to die that will in any adequate way address all the many perspectives. There are a couple of things I think I can mention that I think most Christians would agree with. When we die, we no longer live as we do now in this body on this earth, and something comes next. Christians, by and large, base this on what is in the New Testament accounts of Jesus' resurrection and promise that there will be something more after this life. I think I can say that Christians are resurrection people, but the specific of what that looks like and when and how that happens differs. It differs officially from denomination to denomination and church to church. And I think it differs unofficially from Christian to Christian. What I mean is that while many of us Christians may mostly identify with one particular church or denomination, we may not agree with all of the doctrines that that church or denomination professes. I have a sister who became Catholic when she married, and I said to her, are you sure about this? Because, this is different from the way we've been raised. And she said, oh, young Catholics don't believe all that stuff. And that's what I mean. I think there are a lot of things going on within each of us that I'm not sure a lot of Methodists have even read all of the doctrines and things that we're supposed to believe as United Methodists. So I can give you one Christian's perspective, and that's mine. And so what you need to know is me. And Bob gave you some of that. I can tell you that I am a lifelong Christian and United Methodist. I've been married, divorced, and remarried. I do not have any children. I have a bachelor's degree in theater and Russian studies. And as Bob said, I have a master's degree from Perkins. I worked for 23 years in the corporate world, and for the last 9 years, I have been involved in ministry in the local church, and I am not ordained. So I give you this outline of myself only to emphasize that what I will say this evening are my views, greatly influenced by my journey over the past 55 years that I was mature. So please do not leave here this evening exclaiming, "So all Christians believe," or "United Methodists think," because what you're going to be hearing is me. There are some books and authors that I should mention, as they have been greatly influential throughout my journey. I think the most influential, if I'm honest, is this one. It is my golden book about God, and it was given to me when I was 2. And I think it was the most formative concept of God that I ever received, and that I still pretty much still maintain. I would also say anything written by Madeline Lingle, and then this book, which I'll reference again, called Raising Hell by Sharon Baker. It has been very influential in my current thinking on this topic that we're talking about this evening. And then, of course, throughout all of it is the Bible. But what you need to know about what I think about the Bible is that I believe that it is a human endeavor, greatly influenced by God. And I believe it's most valuable when we know that what it shows us is the human struggle to understand God. So, what I believe right now is that we have a faith, not a fact, and that there's a whole lot we don't know. We are created by a loving God. I believe we are created for the purpose of relationship, and relationship with God, each other, and all of God's creation. And that we are supposed to be actively involved in seeking all of that relationship. Christianity is the tradition that speaks to me in large part because I was raised within this tradition. I tend to think of God in Trinitarian ways. And while I have sought to educate myself about other faith traditions, the only one I have ever lived is Christianity. But I do not believe that it is the only path to a relationship with God, and there are probably some Christians that would differ in that opinion. I believe that if I'm to live my faith, then I have to trust God, period. In the gospel attributed to Matthew, Jesus is reported to have told his followers, "Don't worry about your life." And this is where Jesus goes on about lilies of the field and what we need to eat and drink, and that we shouldn't be worried about any of that. And he wraps up by saying, instead, desire first and foremost God's kingdom and God's righteousness. Therefore, stop worrying about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I abbreviated this passage. This is a passage of scripture where, like I said, God talks about taking care of physical needs, but I believe it's meant to be a broader message. I interpret this to mean that God will take care of whatever comes next. So while discussing it might be interesting or even entertaining, none of us know what is coming. And so as followers of Jesus, we are called to pay attention to the present, what is right in front of us. And this means I must strive to be aware of the needs of others, aware of situations of injustice, so that I can help and work with God to improve those things and not spend my time worrying about the future. Now, concerning the question this evening and the perceived Christian construct that I started out with tonight, I should probably address a few specifics. Is there judgment? I prefer to think of it as a time of reconciling or maybe refinement, where we are made aware of where we have succeeded and where we have missed the mark or failed. I believe that ultimately we will come to a place of understanding and we'll have an opportunity to choose or not choose to be fully reconciled with God. Depending on what we choose determines whether we move forward with God or cease. And that is something that Sharon Baker explores in her book. Is there a resurrection? Christianity professes a belief that Jesus was resurrected in bodily form, and some Christians believe that we will be resurrected in the same way Jesus was. I don't really think it matters. Being with God seems to me to be the point, and it doesn't really matter what form I take at that point. What is the time frame? That seems to be a concern. Is judgment, resurrection going to happen right away? Will it wait until end times? I don't know. Writers of the New Testament, particularly Paul, gospel writers as well as Jesus, wrote with the concept that the second coming of Christ, the end times, were going to be imminent. So now, 2,000 plus years later, we're kind of left wondering how that all works out. But I think it's important to remember that that's the perspective of Scripture, that it's all going to happen really quick. Perhaps it's a multi-phase process. In the Gospel attributed to Luke, during the crucifixion, one of the criminals hanging near Jesus asked Jesus to remember him, to which Jesus replied, "I assure you that today you will be with me in paradise." So a lot of Christians take that to mean that something does indeed happen immediately. But the fact is that we do not know, and as I said before, I'm not sure I'm supposed to concern myself with that too much. And lastly, is there an eternal damnation or hell? For me, this is incongruent with a creative God of love. If I believe that God creates out of love, and I believe God desires us more than we can imagine, then eternal condemnation does not make sense to me. Ultimately, I believe with all my heart that ours is a God of love that desires us to love and be loved in this life right now. What comes after this life, I believe, will also be a reflection of that amazing love as well. I'll leave you with a quote from Paul's letter to the Romans. "I am convinced that nothing can separate us from God's love in Christ Jesus our Lord. Not death or life, not angels or rulers, not present things or future things, not powers or height or depth, or any other thing that is created." Thank you.
It seems to me what we're all obligated to do is to try as best we can to be honest and authentic in our faith. And I think we just heard a presentation that is honest and is authentic and did exactly what we said. Thank you. Our next presenter is Nityananda Chandra Das. I know how to pronounce his name. It's Nityananda Chandra Das. I'll try one more time. Nityananda Chandra Das. Okay, I didn't practice at all. Nityananda is a minister of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and he's engaged in his ministry at Kalachandji Hare Krishna Temple in Dallas. He was born in Hawaii. He learned about Christian consciousness from a friend, actually Portland. He studied philosophy at Portland Community College, and then he became a monk. In Temple. He then, I think, you then moved to Brooklyn. Is that the way it happened? Or you were a monk in Portland? And then he moved to Brooklyn. And they told the story of the way he met his wife. He was selling Hare Krishna books in Brooklyn or Times Square. And he must have been a very persuasive salesman because they got married when he was 24. They have 2 children. So he's obviously a very persuasive guy, and I've seen him going. I saw him pick up his children. He really loves his children. Among his many talents are working with youth and young adults, and he's a wonderful singer and musician. He has an active blog that addresses diverse topics in a very interesting way. Lots of YouTube, lots of social media stuff and all. He is frequently asked to comment on topics in the regular Dallas Morning News Texas State column. And I've been with him on 3 different occasions. And from those, I come away being very impressed both with the depth of his spirituality, with his being immersed in the Bhagavad Gita, and of his clarity of expression. So we're very fortunate to have him this evening to speak again on the topic of what we mean by death from a Hindu.
So thank you very much for your kind invite. First, I can start off with a little story. This is from a teacher of mine when he was. Can you? So a teacher of mine, he grew up in Chicago. He was a young Jewish boy, and he had many questions about life. He decided to go on a European trip just to visit temples, mosques, synagogues, and just learn about spiritual life. And that trip ended him up in India. He had hitchhiked his way to India. It was in 1970. And he tells us one story. He was sitting outside of the temple. He was sitting in meditation. And he heard these huge footsteps. And he opens his eyes, he's a little startled. He sees this muscular European man. And so he just closes his eyes again. He doesn't want to be distracted. He wants to focus his meditation on God. And then he starts to hear the cackle or barking of monkeys. He opens his eyes and he sees this. It's a very large, muscular. He's definitely not natural atmosphere. He's a bodybuilder, and he's surrounded by monkeys. He has 2 bags of groceries in his arms, and so the monkeys are harassing him. I don't know, have any of you been to India, or any of you have dealt with monkey muggers? They can be really intense. And so this large man, he picked up a giant rock, and he gave out a big roar like a hero. Roar! Big roar. And the monkeys just got closer. And he dropped the groceries. And the monkeys grabbed the bag, they put their backs to him, and started eating all the fruits. And he ran away. And the gentleman who was meditating says, I think hopefully he kept his bladder. He was very scared. Within a few moments, an 8-year-old child came, and he had a little rock. Took his little rock and lifted it up in the air, and all the monkeys ran, went up the fence, up the trees, and he sat there and he started eating fruits out of the can, right in front of all the monkeys. 8-year-old boy. So he said, if we are unfamiliar with something, then it becomes very fearful. We are unfamiliar with death, then we are fearful. If we know what death is, then we can approach it without any fear. The monkeys have this mystic potency. It's not even just smell, they can just sense the fear. So this gentleman, although he was so muscular and large, monkeys could sense his fear. They took up that big boulder, they weren't afraid of him at all. But the little 8-year-old boy who is very familiar with monkeys, they were afraid of him. So in the Eastern literature, the Vedic literature such as the Bhagavad Gita, this is a very ancient text, it's over 5,000 years old. Thoreau, Emerson, Gandhi, Thomas Aquinas, many great thinkers have attributed a lot of wealth of knowledge that they've gained from studying the Bhagavad Gita. So in the Vedic literature such as Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Upanishads, it deals in great detail what is the nature of the self and what is death. So how many here have had to take a biology class before? Everyone. So in biology, a multiple choice question for you. How does the body grow? Is it A, bodies grow just like balloons. You just add some water, you add air, and it stretched and got bigger over time, and pretty much you come up to 5'8", or 5'9", or 5'4". Or is it B, your old cells are replaced with new cells, or multiples of new cells? Which one do you think? B, are you sure? Yes. So in a biology class, you were taught within a period of 7 years, every single cell in your entire body has changed. So, anybody here over 7 years old? It's the same person that is seated here that was there at the time your mother gave birth to you, but it's not the same body. You could say, oh, it's the same body. It's grew. The body has actually changed. For example, if you go to Kalachandji and eat some lasagna, that lasagna becomes the building blocks of your body. Before you eat that lasagna, you think, this is me? No. So the first lesson in Eastern philosophy is that you are not actually your body. You are the soul within the body. You do not have a soul. You are a soul, and you have a body. And understanding this is the foundation of spiritual life. Just like if I want to come to Northaven, I first have to know, where am I at? Everyone wants to be happy, but you have to know what is the I, what is the me, who is the person that I'm trying to make happy. If I think I'm the body, then my route, my plan for happiness will be based on the body. Comforts, sensual enjoyments, or for the mind, if I think I'm my mind, even though that is also changing, and I am the observer of the mind, then I'll be looking for fame, profit, adoration, distinction, different enjoyments of the mind. And I may go to the bank, or I may go to a church, I may go to a synagogue, I may go to a temple, and I will aspire to achieve happiness through the body if I do not know who I am. So going to a religious organization and seeking the temporary benefits of the body is like going to Bill Gates and saying, oh, Bill, can you spare a penny? When you can ask for something much more substantial. So the soul is completely different from the body, and what makes the soul happy is a loving connection to God. Just imagine if your head grew a brain, just for the sake of that. There. And your hands have a discussion. They say, why are we spending our time working so hard to feed this guy, Mr. Stomach, when we can enjoy on our own? So he takes some mashed potatoes, rub it in. And how do the hands feel? Wonderful. This is great. Right? The skin feels a little bit softer. But give it a week. How do those hands feel? With lethargy, pain. But as soon as they have another meeting, saying, oh, this is a bad decision. Let's try feeding the stomach again. They automatically get some energy. So as soon as the soul engages in loving service to the Supreme Soul, he becomes satisfied. When we try to enjoy separately from God, we become frustrated. It doesn't actually touch us. So the food for the soul is called bhakti yoga, or the loving connection to the Supreme Soul in the mode of service. Happens automatically. Just like you put food in your mouth, you taste it automatically. You get nutrition automatically, and your hunger goes away automatically. So in the same way, if you serve God with love, three things happen automatically. You experience the pleasure of that loving connection. You get knowledge, which is compared to nourishment, and your attachment to material things reduces. That's how we should examine how we're progressing in our spiritual life. Is how is our attachment reducing to the temporary? Like Jesus said, do not store your treasures where thieves, moths, and rust lie. So don't invest in the temporary, invest in the eternal. So the body is actually composed of two parts. There is what is called the subtle body, or astral body, mental body, and then there's the gross physical body. And then underneath that is the soul. Just like if you were to put a latex glove on your hand, and then a boxing glove over that. The gross physical body is like the boxing glove. The subtle body is like the latex glove. And underneath is the soul, being covered by these layers. Just like if you cover a thin layer of blue paint on the light bulb, that light will be limited to just giving out that blue hue. So simply the soul is being covered by the body, and therefore we're only seeing a glimpse of its blue. Can someone name a beautiful actor or actress off the top of your head? Angelina Jolie. So if she was here, everyone would probably be happy to meet her. But if the soul had left the body, would anybody think that body is attractive? Would you want to be anywhere around it? So what is giving the attractive quality to the body is the soul. The body is actually just about organic chemicals. It is the soul that gives its beauty, the luster of the eyes. So as soon as the soul leaves the body does not produce this attractive quality. And that attractive quality is just limited. Actually, if you think of the body, the organic chemicals separate from the soul, you definitely can see it's not attractive. Once this remove just a small layer of skin, the body is not very attractive. It is the beauty of that soul, just like the light bulb that's being expressed through that layer. So I'll give you a little example. So when the living entity leaves this body, so say this is the soul. Mr. iPad here is our mental body, and my back here is the physical body. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, just as the air carries aromas, air is itself neutral. Air goes over a rose garden, it smells rosy, goes over Staten Island, it smells like a garbage dump. So the subtle body carries the soul to its next destination. What is that destination? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you hold dear at the time of death, which will be an accumulation of the consciousness of your life, you're going to get a state of being suitable to what you hold dear. So if you have no other desire in this world but to love and serve God, then you go back to the kingdom of God. Confirmation. But if you have desires to enjoy the temporary, then, according to the Vedic literature, you again take birth in this world. In various, not only statuses of life, we see so much different statuses of life in human life, but also various species of life and various different life forms of other planetary systems. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives accurate measurements between Earth and different planetary systems in our solar system, just like Mars, Jupiter. Those measurements correspond to modern science. But they also discuss life on other planets. And they even discuss the plutonic region of Yamaraj, or the angel of death, which was something you mentioned earlier. So there's an angel who does all that judging on. His name is Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. And so, according to the desires that we've cultivated, according to what we deserve, the reactions of our past deeds were placed in various situations. Some of them may be hellish, some of them may be heavenly. There are planets that are more heavenly than Earth, there are planets more hellish than Earth. But the true home of the soul is to go back to the spiritual world. That's actually where we started off from. You have heard of the story of Adam and Eve, Lucifer, the prodigal son. In the Vedic culture, that is our story. We were all originally in the home of the Father. But we have left because we have manifested desires that is contrary to the desire of the kingdom of God. And that is to love thy Lord with all their heart, all their mind, all their soul. So, we can take birth in various situations, and this understanding of past lives gives a framework why we can understand how people are born in different circumstances. For example, if religion tells us that a person is supposed to love God, and a person is born in communist China, where there's not even a word for God, how is that fair? And that soul is being placed in that situation by God himself. If he is the all-powerful controller, that means everything is happening under his jurisdiction, within his sanction. So with the framework of a previous life, then we can understand why someone is born in different circumstances that are not economically, socially, religiously, and spiritually equal. If a person is atheistic, then God is going to say, I'm not going to force you to love me. That wouldn't be love. If you have that desire, this is a birth, a situation that matches your desire. Therefore, some people are born in very religious families, or you can be born in a religious family, but the family has a problem with drugs. You cannot say that everyone's born in equal circumstances. We're definitely not treated equally if it's just one life. But if we have lived here for many lives, then we can see we're carrying the baggage of our previous lives that were being placed in different situations. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Nityananda, Chandra, Ranger Dogs. Got it right. We appreciate very much your very clear presentation. You've heard two very authentic statements from two different faith perspectives about that. And now we're going to ask you to go to some clusters. You have a card that tells you the cluster that you're in. And I may ask those of you who have the letter H, who may put you in a different cluster. I think that may work better this evening. And let me just say this, that what I hope we'll be able to do is to take what you've heard. You've heard two very clear messages. Not to go debate which was right, or whatever, or whether you agree or disagree, but rather to try to take in what you heard, along with what you yourself say to yourself about this whole matter of what does it mean to die, and then try to engage just in personal conversation about that. There's no right answers, no wrong answers, and it's not to persuade somebody, it is to listen to what others are saying, and it's to try to have an exchange and try to understand what may not be fully understandable to you right now, to leave that group with a better understanding of that which doesn't quite compute with you right now. That's what we're trying to do. And at the same time, for you to get to know each other in a more personal way. So you go, the clusters have a big letter on them out there, and we'll go to A through G. Again, I said if you're in H, we will phone you over to another cluster, which is going to work better. And we will have, and you can make a donation during that time if you wish. We will come back, let's be back here. We've got a let's make it back here by 8:20. So it's going to give you a good 35 minutes of activity. And when we come back here, we will frame some questions that will come back here for them to respond to, and we will have dialogue, and they will have dialogue with each other around that. So now, if you go to your clusters, and we will give you signals that it's time for you to do this.
So this is live.
Oh, live. Okay. No, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have a card or any way to contact you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I was going to ask the question. There was a similar program to this a few years ago at another group.
Oh,
And one of the comments I gave afterwards was, I said, you know, in the English language, you can so often refer to each other as people or human beings, but there's a significantly different implication in the two words, because people is just a noun, like something that crawls around on four things, and human being is two words, and one is a noun and one is an adjective, but the adjective is human and the noun is being.
Yeah.
And I said, did someone understand something we've long forgot, that human beings are essentially spiritual beings and having a human body and having a human experience?
that's a very, thank you for that.
So I'd be interested to see if any you and her have any opinions on that.
Oh, that's very nice, yeah.
So, and another thing, about 25 years ago, the biggest Methodist church in Dallas, there's a guy named Don Benton. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not. He gave a very interesting presentation on similar topics like this. He said you can think of the human being like the lady cooks in the kitchen with a little 3-minute timer, you know, for the soft-boiled egg. He said it has a big section at the top. It has a big section at the bottom. In the middle, he said the bottom is like the phenomenal physical world we see. The top is like the spiritual realm. There's aspects of both within every human being. In the middle is a human soul that has the potential to apprehend both realms.
Nice.
So I just thought those were kind of some
Thank you,
interesting
Bill.
thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Do you have a card? Or-
Yes, let me get the card. So we're going to continue on, so stay tuned.
So my question I was given was, how do you know when you have enough brownie points? How do you know when you have enough brownie points? So is reincarnation the same if you are young, or is it different if you're elderly, sick, or feeble? What determines if you live an A-rated life versus a Z-rated life? So, as we mentioned, young puppies were on Mahlon, that whatever state of mind you have at the time of death, that state will attain without fail. So there's a beautiful verse from the ancient book, the Srimad Bhagavatam, where a very young saint, how old do you think he is? If you guess. 5 years old. And he has very deep prayers, and he says, Kumara Acharat Pradyo, from the very beginning of life, one should develop their God consciousness. Durlabha Manusha Janma, because birth in the human body is very rare, and although it's not very long, you can attain the highest goal of life. So one way to see how we're doing with our brownie points is something I mentioned earlier, is seeing, just like if you want to see how healthy you are, you check your fever, check your temperature, see how the fever is going down. So what is my fever for material, temporary pleasures? What is my attraction for those things? One example that I have is just imagine you have not eaten food in 10 days. You're very hungry. And if you found some food in the dumpster near 7-Eleven, you'd probably be excited. And as you go to the dumpster, you find some food, you're about to take a bite of that food. My friend when Shama Sundar Prabhu happens to come by, he makes the best pizzas ever. Perfect crust, smell the bread fragrance, so wonderful. All different types of cheese, perfect mix of different cheeses, mozzarella, cheddar, you have your Kalamata olives, sun-dried tomatoes, some Parmesan on top, some olive oil. Now, you are eating slice number 13. At this point, do you still think about the dumpster? He's given you 30 slices of pizza. You have enough to fully be satisfied. So, do you have to go through a 12-step program to get rid of your attachment to that dumpster? No. You've experienced what is called Param Drishtavivartante, a higher taste. Now, when was the dumpster attractive? When you did not have that higher taste, when you did not have that higher experience. So, when our attraction to trying to feverishly enjoy the temporary is because we are not tasting the eternal. So we struggle to be on top, to be the king of the temporary. So when our attraction to the temporary reduces because we become more experienced in our pleasure of engaging in loving connection to the Supreme Soul, then we can know what's our brownie points. But the quality of spiritual life is that a person becomes very humble. They understand that it is, as she was mentioned, that it's by the mercy of God. So one doesn't become proud, oh yes, God's definitely going to choose me as the best person. But one becomes humble and thinks actually everything is the mercy of the Lord. So even a person who is very spiritually advanced, they have a very humble estimation of themselves. But the main thing is to see what is our fever for enjoying the temporary.
Okay, I have the question, if Christian churches stopped teaching heaven and hell, what would happen? I don't know. I don't know. There again, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody teaching heaven and hell here at Northaven. But there are churches that do still preach and teach heaven and hell. In my opinion, there's sort of this, well, it's a fear-based teaching. And we have to keep people afraid. We have to put this boundary. If you don't, then this. I think that if we truly go to Scripture, if we read the Gospels, and we look at the teachings of Jesus, that Jesus was not fear-based. Jesus didn't do that. So I don't really think that having faith requires encouraging people to be fearful. In fact, I think fear is the very opposite of faith. And so, in my opinion, we'd be a lot better off, I guess, if we weren't teaching and preaching heaven and hell, and truly encouraging people to understand what it is
variation of the brownie point. Our question, related, age-related, like if one is 5, or 10, or 30, or 50, or 70, and tastes that the divine. Can you speak of that from out of that perspective?
So, devotion to God is actually not limited to the type of gender, caste, creed, religion, economic status. Anybody can actually develop their love for God. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that in this endeavor, there is no loss. Whatever you do in deepening your loving relationship with the Supreme Lord, that is never lost to you. Everything else is. Your bank account. I have these nifty shirts. Many of you probably don't have shirts like mine, but I have this shirt that has these pockets here. Did you notice my bottom trousers don't have pockets? But our last shirt has no pockets. When you leave this world, none of your bank accounts, your business projects, your future plans you can take with you. The only thing you can take with you is the love that you developed for the Supreme Lord. So there's never any loss. Actually, what it explained in the Bhagavad Gita, that if you leave this world, you have 3% of your heart dedicated to God, then your next life will continue on 4%. Actually, in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks this question: what happens to somebody who practices spiritual life and later gives up? He says there's no loss. The person will be placed in a situation in the next life, aristocratic family, or a wealthy family, or a religious family, or family of great spiritualists, and they will continue. And it says their attraction to spiritual life will not be based on just religion or something I was born into, but they're more attracted to the themes and the principles of spiritual life in itself, not necessarily just the external features of it. So no loss. Any step you take to bring yourself closer to God, actually is in our tradition. You've probably heard this before. If you take one step towards God, He takes 100 steps towards you. And in the Bhagavad Gita says, according to how someone approaches me, according to how they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So for the atheist, God very happily becomes non-existent, not very happily, but He reciprocates with their mood. For the impersonalist, someone who approaches God and says God is simply just an energy, then God does not become personal with them, because their approach to God is impersonal. Therefore, they don't get any personal help. And one who approaches God as a person, He personally approaches them and makes His existence known to that person. So according to how we approach the Lord, He reciprocates. Thank you.
I think what we say is that God meets us where we are. It's a very similar thing to what he's just shared, and I happen to believe that. I think many Christians believe that depending on where you are in your own seeking, you will find what you need to find. If you choose not to seek, then I think at the end, God meets you where you are and helps you understand what that is. So in reference to our topic tonight, what happens when you die, I think our God meets us wherever it is we need to be met. It's a similar concept. This one is based on what we believe dying means. What should a funeral mean? funerals and memorial services are for the living. The person who has passed has gone on, and so I think they should be whatever the living needs. Those closest to the one who has passed need to have the biggest voice in what that might look like. I happen to be in a camp, I guess, that really prefers celebratory type memorials as opposed to strict traditional funerals, because I have found those, in my experience, to be extremely impersonal. I've been at far too many funerals where the person presiding stands up and says, "Well, I didn't really know Joe." And I'm like, "Well, how did you get the mic?" So I much prefer less tradition and more what does the family, what do the loved ones need in that situation. And whenever possible, I think we should celebrate the life rather than mourning the death. Even in those really difficult situations where it's a younger person, I think when we can celebrate the life, that's probably working in the long run.
So as a minister, I get to preside over several funerals here in Dallas. Sometimes it's when they have a child. Speaking the truth about the soul, I think, is also important in such functions, because it's just like, have any of you ever been to a essential oil shop before, or a fragrance shop? Now, when you have smelled too many things and your nose doesn't really work anymore, what do they give you to reset it? Some coffee beans to smell. So coffee is a bitter smell. Too much bitterness, one becomes kind of filled with darkness. But some bitterness gives us a clarity. So in such a situation, when the situation provides clarity, a clear message can be very, very helpful. Especially when you have a situation where it's like a child. Not most of us are, I don't think any of us are built for seeing a child passing, but we're built to handle a father, a parent, a grandfather, not a child. Actually, it's described in the ancient scriptures that there are different ages, different times, where the world functioned differently. And there was a time within this world where children never passed away before their parents. This is an effect of the times that things start to change.
Well, I'd add, I guess, a little caveat that I do believe that there is healing to be done in the morning, and that everyone should move through what they need to move through, and it's different, I think, in every situation. Move through mourning, and people around need to be aware of that and respectful of that. But as pertains to the celebration of life or a funeral, I think sometimes they can actually be very harmful if we're not focused on the right things.
There are a couple of questions here. I'm going to read both of them. They're kind of interrelated, I think. One is, after death, will we have consciousness? Does consciousness transcend death? And the second is, elaborate on we are not the body. And I want you all to respond to those. And before we finish, I want to come back and ask you to answer the question, what does it mean in practice? If we can come back to that specific question.
So the first one was?
Elaborate on we are not the body, or after death we will be consciousness.
After death. So after death, consciousness is actually eternal. The soul is like a spark out of the fire, like the ray of sunshine out of the sun. It shares like the ray of sunshine shares the quality of the sun, but it is not completely the sun. You can't say when the sun's light is hitting your arm, you can't say the sun glow is on your arm. It's a difference, but there is a shared quality. Similarly, a drop of water out of the ocean has a shared quality with the ocean. They're both salty, but they're not absolutely the same in all degrees. So similarly, the soul is part and parcel of God. The soul altogether, add all the souls together, that doesn't make God, because God is also individual, independent. He is not dependent on our existence to be existent. So, the soul is qualitatively one with God, quantitatively different. So God is never born. God is never created. God does not have a beginning, because God is spiritual. So in the Vedic concept, in the same way, the soul is never born. The soul is never created. The first thing that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, never was a time when I did not exist, the Supreme Lord, nor you, nor all these other kings, nor in the future any of us shall cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth and old age, the soul simply accepts another body at death, and a spiritually minded person is not bewildered by such a change. As a person gives up old garments, putting on new ones, simply the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up old and useless ones. The soul cannot be cut to pieces by a weapon, or burned by fire, withered by the wind. It cannot be burned or dried. It is immutable, insoluble, eternally the same. So the soul is taking birth in different situations, and it always has consciousness. But the consciousness, as long as it is in the cycle of birth and death, the wheel of samsara, his consciousness is becoming covered, limited, like we discussed, the color, the tinting on the light bulb, the blue tint. It's not the full light, it's only the blue hue that's being expressed there. So the soul is being covered. Therefore, in the human body, there's so much expression. The soul is there. We had an unfortunate history in America where we enslaved hundreds of thousands of men from Africa. And the plea was, oh, they don't have a soul, so it's fine. It's just property. And in the same unfortunate way, billions and billions of animals are slaughtered under the same plea. They don't have a soul. But what is the symptom of the soul? It's consciousness. How do you know the soul is present? Consciousness is the energy of the soul. For example, this microphone may work on a 9-volt battery. Awesome. If I take the battery out and put it into a wall clock, it won't work like a microphone. If I take the battery out of a wall clock and put it in a little toy robot, it won't work like a wall clock. But it'll show those symptoms of activity. And you know, any wise person knows, no, there's a battery in that thing. There's a battery in that clock. There's some kind of power source. The functioning behave differently. So if you put the soul, in the body of a dog, the brain of a dog, what would you do with Mark? So this body is simply a different vehicle. If you have F-16 fighter jet, you can't use it to cross White Rock Lake. If you have a boat, you can't use it to fly in the air. So the vehicles operate differently, and some are more limiting, some are more expanding, and you can do more things. For example, question for you: what can you do as a human being that animals cannot? Animals eat, we eat. Animals mate, we mate. Animals sleep, we sleep. Animals defend, we defend. So what can we do as a human that Grow spiritually. Ask questions. Have this dialogue. If we had a little pigment in this room, we think, oh, these people are really foolish, you know. But where's the toilet? That's where all the goodies are. I don't know if you've been to some foreign countries, but that's what big little pigments like to do. So, as human beings, we have this greater degree of intelligence where we can ask questions who am I, who is God, what is God, and what is the goal of life. If we use our advanced degree of intelligence to be better at being an animal, to use our intelligence, how can we be better at eating? How do we be better at sleeping? How do we be better at defending and mating? For example, defense. So much intelligence, so much energy, so much wealth, so much of our resources are directed towards defense, an animalistic propensity. Sleeping, we have huge skyscrapers. Eating, we have all these fast food chains. And mating, you just go to the grocery store, and each magazine is telling you how you can improve your mating skills. Whereas a dog can mate in the street, no problem. It doesn't need those magazines. So to use our intelligence for animalistic propensities just makes us a foolish animal. We have to use our intelligence to ask these questions. Who am I? What is the goal of life? So one can take birth in different situations based on what they behave. For example, someone who uses a human life and only behaves like a dog. Mother Nature will say, so be a dog in your next life, because you wasted the opportunity of human life. The Buddha has given the example that if you can imagine a tortoise he comes up for air every 100 years, and by chance, he comes up once every 100 years, and there's a log floating over his head. And by chance, there's a hole in that log. And by chance, there's a little toothpick floating in the hole in that log. And by chance, as he comes up, his head pops up through the hole, and the toothpick balances on his nose. That is the rarity of human birth. So to use human birth to attain the gains that are easily available in animal life is considered the most miserly thing one can do. A miser is someone who doesn't use their wealth properly. They hoard abilities. They don't spend that wealth for proper purposes. So the first question is, did I answer one? After death, life, consciousness. So yes, sir.
I'll be brief. We don't know. As far as we are not the body, I know there are Christians who really, they want to go forward in this body. And I find that fascinating because I find this body increasingly limiting as I get older. My personal belief, and many Christians that I know believe that we move beyond this body, and that when we die, what is in the ground or in the urn or given to science is the shell of who we are, and it is the essence of who we are that goes forward with God. And that's your question as far as what happens when we die. I think what I would say the Christian hope is that we go forward with God in whatever form, in whatever way that God sees as the best way.
So, how many of you like ghost stories? So, in Vedic literature, they discuss the subtle body, the gross physical body, and the spiritual body. In the spiritual world, we actually have a form. Just like, why does my jacket have two parts for my arms? Or why do my pants have, or why does the glove have all these extending parts for my fingers? Because it's made to fit something underneath my hand, my So similarly, this body is similar to our spiritual body, but this body is not, it's different in quality. The spiritual body is called Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. Sat means it's eternal, Chit means it's full of knowledge, and Ananda means it's full of bliss. Does anybody have an eternally knowledgeable, blissful body here? Our bodies now are asat, they're temporary. They're not full of knowledge. We have cancer, we don't know what's going on behind us. Our consciousness is very limited. We don't even know who am I. And Nityananda, it's not very blissful. Are your backs giving you any bliss right now? It's kind of a bad deal. For example, we can offer you, everyone come here, we'll massage your toe. That sounds kind of nice. Then after that, we'll take a little needle and poke it in your toe. Is it a good deal or a bad deal? You pretty much get more pain than pleasure when you get out of this body. Your teeth. How much pleasure do your teeth feel? They can feel lots of pain. Not exactly a best time. So that is not the kind of body we have in the spiritual world. This is simply a covering of our actual soul, or actual body. So the subtle body, as mentioned earlier, carries our different conceptions of life from one body to another. So how long does birth take place? Birth takes 8-9 months. So simply the process of death takes time, it takes some kind of clarity. If someone is to die in a very sudden state, such as a gunshot, accident, or intoxication where they're completely, their consciousness is all over the place, then they can be in a situation where they have, like the example we gave, was the bag, iPad, and keys. So the subtle body gets disconnected from the gross body, but does not take birth again, because it didn't go through the long natural process of death. So we have now a soul with a subtle body, a mental body. The subtle body is composed of 3 elements: the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. One example is the body's like a chariot. The horses are the senses. The horses come in contact with objects that attract you. Your mind is what controls your senses. The function of the mind is, I like this, I don't like this. And the intelligence is the driver. Gives direction. The passenger is the soul. If the intelligence is weak, we will simply follow the directions of our senses and we'll end up meditation. We won't actually get to where we become satisfied. So the subtle body is the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. Just like sometimes when you dream, you've heard about the Egyptians, they talked about the subtle body. Now when you dream, sometimes you leave the gross body, the astral connection between the gross body and the subtle body. You can go to someone who's in deep sleep, and they're not really there. Their body's practically on life support. You can talk to them, open up your eyes, but their consciousness is not really there. It's just slightly connected. So when that connection is cut, it's called death. And a person who is in this ghostly situation can stay there for some time. Therefore, in many traditions throughout the world have type of ceremonies that they can do on behalf of the dead to grant piety to that person, so they again can take birth. Therefore, we have the Day of the Dead, Halloween, we should have offerings to our ancestors in India as well, to grant people passage into the next birth. So if we just have a little time, I have a story of the ghost of John Lennon. 5 minutes. No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, there are 2 unanswered questions in all of this. You've heard 2 different presentations. One that acknowledges a lot of what we don't know, and one that elaborated with a history of elaborating an understanding of what happens. And one is a transition that is a transition of form and not of consciousness, and then there's uncertainty and a different framing about what that change is. We're going to be going into other parts of all this next time. We'll stay on time next time. We've got to have the drawing first, and would you get someone to draw? And while we're doing that, let me mention that the kind of topics we're going to be looking at, next month we will be talking about the question of what does it mean to die. And then there will be topics like how do we prepare for death, what do we expect after death, how do we deal with the death of those we love, how do we talk to our children about death. Variations on those kinds of themes is what we will be following. And the winner is Lucy Hight. This is Mayor's mother-in-law. It's legit. It's legit. So, would you put the books over here? You don't have to do it right now. You can wait. Thank you again very much for coming. Hope you come back. Thank you very much.
Yes, great trip.
Thank you.
She did good.
Oh,